Welcome to Impactology Live. Our next guest speaker, which I will share very shortly, but when we're organising this event, we have some positive unintended consequences. And some of those positive unintended consequences are we get introduced to amazing people that are doing impactful work that otherwise we wouldn't be aware of. And today's guest speaker falls perfectly into that category. Josh Ross is the CEO and co-founder of Humanitix. And we were introduced to Josh by Mark Redding, who is the head of foundation at Atlassian, who we spoke with earlier today. I'd like to share just some backstory about Josh. And this is a ripping story for me, and I'm really pleased that we've come across it, and we can't wait to chat to Josh. So Joshua Ross was a hedge fund analyst, a partner in a successful hedge fund by the time he was 26. However, together with friend and engineer Adam McCurdy, he wanted to do more. He wanted to make an impact on the world. And so one night, on a rooftop in Sri Lanka, an idea was born. Many people have these ideas, but they lead nowhere. Instead, Josh and Adam ran with it. They decided to challenge the ticketing industry. They wanted to take the billions of dollars spent on booking fees and spend them on something meaningful. They will channel them into education. And so in 2015, Humanitix was born. The innovative idea took off. Soon after launch, they received funding from Atlassian and the New South Wales government. In 2018, Humanitix won the Google Impact Challenge and received a $1 million prize. Humanitix has doubled in size every 6 months and as a non-profit invests all booking fees into education projects. The rise has been spectacular, but more important is the dollars raised for education. They truly are a charity for the tech generation, and it's with great pleasure we welcome Joshua Ross.
Thanks for joining us, Josh. And we're going to hear a lot about the Humanitix story. But before we jump into that, as George mentioned, you were a hedge fund manager, and the perception of hedge fund managers is perhaps geared towards making money, lots and lots of money. So tell us about your background, how you first got into that role, and what propelled you to get out of that.
Yeah, sure. My first job was my first legal job was at 14, flipping burgers at Nando's. Before that, I was mowing lawns. And my dad said to me when I was flipping burgers when I got home one night on a Thursday night shift, I was like complaining about how I stank of burgers. And he's like, you can also get paid to think. You don't have to be doing stuff in the back of a kitchen if you don't want to be. And he told me a bit about the stock market, and that got me really interested in that idea of getting paid to think. And so I opened up a stock trading account at like 15 or 16, and my dad said, look, rather than just punting on ideas, the best fund managers in Australia release quarterly reports where they tell you their best ideas. Why don't you just read those and steal one or two that make sense to you? So I did that. And then when I went to university, I emailed those fund managers and said, thanks for that idea. It worked. I didn't invest in your fund because I'm not rich enough, but thank you. I stole your idea and it worked. Can I please have a job with you? I love this industry. And so that's how I got into that industry. But the reason I did it was I only ever wanted to learn how to make money and then use that as a tool to let me do what I wanted with my life. And I haven't made enough money to not have to work again. But that was an awesome industry to learn about how industry works, how the economy works. But Adam's been my best mate from uni. That's what I started Humanitix with. And we've always been grappling with trying to create a career of purpose. And what matters most to us is that children can thrive and give back to their community no matter what their background. And so it was about trying to create a vehicle that would leverage that. And that's what Humanitix is. And so I was never going to be at a hedge fund for longer than a couple of years. It was never the game plan.
Before I go to the next question, what was your best share? What was the share that you got into that made you the most?
In high school, it was HDF is the code.
Okay.
It got acquired by APA eventually, but it was a gas pipeline running through Australia, and I had like a really good monopoly asset and was trading pretty cheap. I didn't understand any of that. It just kind of made sense as a kid.
Fantastic. That's a
It was
great
Alan Gray, the fund manager that I stole the idea from.
shout out to
Still
him.
remember.
So you briefly mentioned Adam McCurdy there, your friend that you co-founded this. Tell us about your connection with him and how it came about. As George said, on a rooftop in Sri Lanka.
Yeah, so we met. We actually went to the same school, but he was a year older than me, so we didn't really know each other in school. But then we had some mutual friends, and we were 19. I just finished my first year of uni. He had finished his second, and the two mutual friends had decided to go to Southeast Asia for the university break. And so we were going to tag along, but then the other two friends pulled out. And so we were like, well, do we still go? Well, I kind of know you and you seem all right. But then we spent 3 months backpacking together and make or break. We came back best friends. And then fast forward a couple of years, we were finishing our degrees and we went to Sri Lanka for 2.5 months. And it was there that we were about to start our corporate careers. And we were doing a lot of hiking, and on hiking you get to chat forever. In this awesome area, and we found this blown out house. Like, it still had mugs and all types of stuff, but like the house was completely abandoned. The roof was completely blown out, and we were on the top of the roof having a drink and chatting under the stars. It was like a beautiful moment, and we were talking about why people we had both had friends back in Sydney who had gone into the corporate career and ended up not chasing their dreams. And we recognize that the main reason people don't is because of the loneliness. Like, it's really hard to step away from the conventional path when none of your friends are. And it only gets harder with time. It's very hard to start something on your own. So we thought, okay, well, that's the main limiting factor. Why don't we just, whatever the idea comes, we'll support each other to do it, and at least we won't be alone. And so we made a pact, and it was 6 years later that we actually had a good idea, and we called on that promise. But the foundation was laid there.
Fantastic. So if we go back to that small hut in Sri Lanka, is there going to be a plaque saying this is where Humanitix was born?
I don't know. We'd have to find it again. Sadly, it was almost 10 years ago now. So that's a good idea. If Humanitix is successful, ultimately.
There you go. It can be a new tour. So you mentioned obviously the bond between you and Adam, and you're going to share this idea. So when it first started, you agreed to split your salary with him, so to support you both. How did you come to the agreement? How did it work?
Yeah. So staying true to that, we'll act as one entity. We won't do things alone. And me and Adam are pretty much married. We've lived together, we've traveled together, we're best mates. He's got a fiance, but she's the second in line. So when it came to starting Humanitix, we recognized that as a tech charity, we were doing something pretty different. No one was going to fund this PowerPoint presentation. It didn't make much sense. Nothing like this had quite been done before. So we had to fund it ourselves. Neither of us are millionaires. And so we both moved back to our parents' place. But we decided that we'd be stronger if I stayed in my job and we shared my salary rather than both just quitting and going full time. Because we didn't have any equity. So a tech startup with no revenue can't attract debt. So we shared my salary, and together we bankrolled it for the first 18 months for proof of concept, which we knew that if it worked, we'd have to convince philanthropists to back this idea. But for 16 months, we shared my salary in a handshake, which was just sharing it after tax. And then Adam did such a good job building Humanitix, and I was doing weeknights and weekends with him, but he was doing a kind of lonely journey for 14 months there. But he was the right guy to do it as an engineer. And then we'd sold over $1 million in tickets in that first 14 months. And we're like, it's working, it needs two of us. So we then volunteered for about 4 or 5 months. And in that time, our first employee, James, saw us present at an event similar to this kind of. And he contacted us 2 weeks after and said, I'm in. And we're like, well, we got no salaries, we have no equity, so we can't pay you. So I'll get a bar job on the weekend and move back to my parents. Wow. So he did that. He worked for free with us for 3 months. So it was just the three idiots pushing this idea up the hill with no equity for a while there. And then we got our first funding. And so that's how we tracked.
Fantastic. So obviously starting a business, any business, is a challenge, but going into it with your best friend and potential husband/wife, your relationship, what advice do you have for people out there who are watching who are perhaps thinking of starting a business with a friend? How do you manage that relationship? How do you still stay friends?
Yeah, we're best mates. I'm going camping down Sutherland for 3 days over a weekend. This weekend, we're taking a long weekend. And his fiance is one of my best friends now. So we recognize off the bat that things would never be equal. And what we mean by that is that we have different jobs in the company. although we're co-CEOs and co-founders. And so if tech is a problem and something's breaking, Adam's up all night working on it. If something on accessing capital or sales or one of the areas I'm leading more in, but he does that too, then I'm going to be under pressure for a couple of weeks trying to fix that. And the biggest thing that we saw go wrong with co-founders is animosity. If one's working really hard and the other one's not. So it's just an agreement that everything's always equal, but the work will ebb and flow. And the other was that if anything pisses you off about the other person, you have to raise it as soon as you're conscious of it. If you raise anything that happened months ago, it's your fault. Why the hell didn't you raise it there and then? And that way you nip any issue in the bud straight away. And the discipline is, even if it feels really petty, like, hey man, you've been using my pencil, like my pen every day, and like you never put it back. Like just raise it. Otherwise shit gets messy. And so it's kept us out of trouble. Like we haven't had any fights.
Fantastic. I'm going to challenge you on that because we're going to hear about all the success that you've had, but there must be one disagreement that comes to mind. One time when you went, geez, Adam really pisses me off. I can't do this. Have you got any examples where you really wanted to challenge him?
Yeah. We've had disagreements, but not fights. Like it's never been like shit, like relationships at risk. I think it's actually hard to really think of anything. Nothing sticks out. Like I know it sounds like a fairy tale, but I think, yes, actually, when I worked in a hedge fund, the whole way the internal culture works is you think you've got a good idea. You want to invest in this company. So you have to go away and pretty much come up with a perfect investment case that's going to get ripped to shreds by your colleagues. And that's their job, to try and pick apart the idea. But the point is you work on it and you perfect it on your own and then you present it to the team. Yeah. That's very unique to that industry. Most industries, you work collaboratively, not siloed. And so when it came to growing Humanitix, I was terrible at that as a teammate in terms of like collaborating. And so Adam had to drill into me like the way to see an idea through to the final idea is not through shooting it down and trying to be the smart guy in the room saying it won't work for these reasons, but just flow with the idea, even if you think it's wrong. What if, as opposed to what's wrong, and that type of stuff. But because we're such good mates, he could tell me that, and I knew that he loved me, and he was like, I didn't feel threatened by it. Where I guess in other dynamics, if you're not friends, like maybe there's tension. You're like, am I adding value here, or am I threatened? But there wasn't that. So it wasn't a fight. It was just maybe a little bit of tension.
You might have to release a book. How to have the perfect business relationship. There'll be a lot of people who can learn from that.
Yeah, I don't know. We might still ruin it. I don't want to jinx it.
Josh,
haven't done that much yet.
Josh, just on that example as well, one of the themes across the Impactology live event has been individuals that are transitioning from corporate roles that are really structured and expectations and KPIs, and then moving into the more fluid entrepreneurial social enterprise space. Following on from that example there, what are some of the skills that you needed to refine over time to be able to work in that more collaborative approach? And what did you have to leave behind?
Yeah. Start with what I've had to learn first. Project management. So there wasn't much project management in my last job. So effectively, whatever you want to achieve, whether you want to launch a new feature or come up with an idea, like you start with step one and you don't talk about step two until you finish step one. And you got to just do it iteratively. And it's been really healthy for me to learn that because we've employed a lot of green people who have come straight out of uni, and like the biggest mistake is you try and perfect the end outcome before starting on step one. That's been a massive learning. Other key learnings, just a bit of more being diplomatic. I was used to an industry where the way people are talking to each other is not, and the expectation is that things get done immediately. But now that I'm in the ticketing world, our clients range every industry, from government to small mum and dad 10-person yoga workshop to big festivals and conferences, schools, universities. And the way you speak to those people and what you can expect in turnaround times is completely different to the hedge fund world. Like that's one of the most competitive industries where people get churned through, and it's very efficient, but it's very cutthroat. Yeah. And so that's been a big learning curve for me. Luckily, I wasn't in it for decades. Otherwise, I'd probably be able to change. And sorry, the other part of your question was, I missed the second part. Sorry, I've forgotten.
So that was what you needed to leave behind in terms of skills
Oh,
or even behaviours.
yeah, I think I've kind of touched on it.
Yeah.
I think look, working in a hedge fund never fundamentally changed who I was. I always tried to chat to people with respect and stuff. But I think what I've left behind is, I don't know exactly. I mean, I've brought the work ethic from it. Like, people in that industry work incredibly hard. I think anyone who's made it in that industry can add a lot of value in any organization just by that work ethic. So that's, I think, yeah, I didn't really inherit some of the bad attributes that are in that industry as well.
And Josh, if I can turn our attention now to the overarching philosophy of Humanitix, can you share that with us, and why the focus on education?
Yeah, sure. So the overarching philosophy, why we're doing this, is our mission is that every child should be able to give back to their community, and effectively your life should not be dictated to you by how much your parents earn or what your skin color is or any of these things. How awesome a world if people are born and are able to actually achieve based on their merit and actually have a decent shot in this world of having a dignified living. And so that's what motivates me and Adam on a day-to-day. Then the question is, well, how do you make the biggest dent in that mission? Because that world's never going to be created perfectly, but it's just about moving closer to it. And so Adam had a technology background, I had an investment background. And in both those industries, it was blatantly obvious that technology is the biggest driver of change in today's world. And the best return on capital is in the technology sector, as you know, Facebook, Amazon, you name it. And so we thought the charity sector is typically really bad at technology. Like, they're not early adopters. It's not an industry known for being disruptive with technology. That's such a shame because we burden the charity sector with the biggest problems in the world, but they don't have the most powerful tools to fix them. And so how cool if we could build a tech charity that could fundamentally use these amazing tools to fix problems. Like, imagine if Amazon, their only mission was to fix the Amazon rainforest, then that would have been fixed like 5 years ago. Like, you know, that's a crazy idea, but like, that's the vision we wanted to create. Like, how could we build that world? And so the problem with tech companies is the more successful they are, the more they lose money for the first 10 years. And so we're like, shit, we need an immediate revenue stream because we're not rich enough, and we're not going to find a crazy philanthropist to back this vision off the bat. We're going to have to prove it can work first. Yeah. And so then we started looking around for like industries that we could disrupt. And so yeah, the fundamental philosophy is we can have way more sustainable leveraged impact in this type of model than traditional charity. And our mission is around, why education, you asked as well? Well, the world we want to create, education's at the center of that. We also care a lot about the environment. One of the best ways you can help the environment is in educating young girls in low-income countries. So that's what our projects focus on internationally. And it's, according to the UN, the 6th best way to help the environment.
And where specifically have you channeled some of those funds to on education and educating young girls?
Yeah, so that's where our relationship with Atlassian is amazing. So they have one of the biggest education foundations in the country now. And so they've got a massive team of experts who just try and think about this problem all day long. And so we team up with them, and we go on an evidence-based approach that they're spearheading. And the partner we're currently working with is called Room to Read. And so they operate mainly through Asia, but also parts of Africa. And yeah, so they're running literacy and life skill programs. They're not just educating girls and helping build libraries. They're actually putting mentors in communities that will teach the families that, hey, it's actually great for a woman to, you know, finish her education, to get a bank account, to be independent, to do what she wants in her life, not, you know, and these are in parts of the world where maybe they would have otherwise been married at 15 and down that path without much agency over their life.
And Mark mentioned that that the architect of that financial model was both you and Adam. So we'd love to hear your perspective. And obviously the Room to Read, obviously headed up by John Wood, who was a former Microsoft executive. Can you share with us how all that came about? We want to hear your perspective, but Mark was glowing of your input and your ideas to bring that all together.
Yeah, that's one time when my background didn't really help. But so me and Adam, when we started Humanitix, we had the view that if we can prove this works and we can bankroll it for the first 18 months, then surely if like we can turn $100 from a philanthropist into $10,000 for the same room to read project. Surely philanthropists are going to back that. Like, I don't know anything else in the world that works quite like that. That would be amazing. Well, we had no non-for-profit experience though, so we didn't realize that most foundations are boxed in with mandates. And guess what? None of them have ticketing in it. It's like not enough people have died from ticketing, so there's no foundations out there set up to make ticketing better. And so we kind of didn't sit in the non-for-profit world at all. And so we needed like thought leaders and pioneers to back us, and they are incredibly hard to find. And so we're very lucky that Mark was in that position. But so the Atlassian Foundation has a mandate around education, and Mark was in a position to understand why Humanitix is an amazing bet for educational outcomes. But in most foundations, computer says no. It's just like, don't get it. Like, and it's not their fault. It's like they don't have the skills to assess a high growth tech startup. They've never had to in that line of work. You're really trying to speak to a VC investor, but a VC investor is not interested because you don't have equity. Just stuck in this hard place. So we had to come with some pretty interesting structures to pull it off.
I've just jotted down a note here, need to launch a hashtag pro ticketing movement for Humanitix. We've got to get that trending. Josh?
Make ticketing great again.
So if we look at the events of 2020, how's COVID affected your organisation and the impact on events? Obviously, there's quite a number of virtual events like Impactology Live. And I should have mentioned up front, our ticketing partner for Impactology Live is and was Humanitix, and will continue to be as we move forward. And both Rita and I, we were sort of looking at that decision about what we're going to do around the ticketing platform. Once we found out your story, Josh, what we're going to do is we're going to commit to promote Humanitix on social media through LinkedIn and other channels. We need to get as many corporates lined up outside your virtual door looking to use the platform. So I thought I'd give that a shout out right now. But talk to us about the impact of COVID and how it may have shifted your plans for the future.
Yeah, so in March of this year, me and Adam were in America. We'd flown over for a month, and we were scoping out where we were going to launch our US operation. Right now we're in Australia and New Zealand, so we've got an office in Auckland as well. And we're having the best 2 weeks of our life, meeting with potential philanthropists, partners, event organizers, and everything was looking amazing. And then COVID hit and we had to emergency fly back. We then, unfortunately, on the first plane that had to actually quarantine. So we had our team in the Sydney office, not sure whether they were going to have jobs, unable to meet with them as the two CEOs because we were both in lockdown. Revenue went from doubling every few months to negative in April because, unlike a lot of other ticketing platforms, we refund our fees if an event gets cancelled. Our view is we're not going to make money for our projects if our clients are losing money. Yeah. And so, we had a really scary April, May. Luckily, we went into that with a really strong balance sheet. So in November 2018, we won the Google Impact Challenge, which included $1 million in prize money. And so we didn't have to let go any of our staff. We got JobKeeper, and we made a strategic decision that we would keep our customer service and sales team at 100% capacity. And I don't know of any other ticketing platform in the world that did that. Eventbrite laid off, I think, close to 50% of their staff globally. And yeah, it's been a bloodbath for our industry. But if you look on Facebook or Google reviews, you'll see hundreds of 5-star reviews from the last 6 months, where every other ticketing platform is getting slammed because it's just been a hell of a time for our industry. And because of that, I'm really excited to share our November volumes in Australia are above November 2019, wow, which is insane considering what's happened to our industry. Eventbrite just reported their third quarter results. They're down 75%. And we think that's what the industry is. And we're flat because of so much market share growth. And in New Zealand, we're above where we were in February before COVID. So we're now in a position where we're looking to go back into the US. And hopefully that's going to happen in the first 6 months of next calendar year. But it's a wait and hold situation with COVID and visas and all that kind of stuff. But luckily we've got through it and we're in an amazing shape considering what's happened to our industry. We're hiring again. But it's fragile, like COVID third wave might hit Sydney tomorrow, might hit Melbourne again. Yeah.
Josh, can you expand on the plans around expansion? And the related question to that is, how do you address the challenge of hypergrowth in an organisation like Humanitix?
Yeah. So one of the other reasons we went for tech is because it's so scalable. So like there's so many good social enterprises. Like in Melbourne, you guys have some of the, I think Melbourne's ahead of Sydney in social enterprise. So you got like Thank You, Who Gives a Crap. Like there's so many kinfolk. Like there's a bunch of awesome initiatives. CoGround, my good mate runs that. And all of them are amazing models. None of them scale as easily as ours because ours is software. And so when we went into New Zealand, our first 6 months, we had no staff there. And the clients there didn't even realize. We've now got a team in Auckland. There are challenges with scaling, but there's lead times with our growth. Like we win an event and then they might use us for their next event, which means it's probably a few months, if not a year down the track. So we've got a pretty good visibility on what our revenue is looking like. And then we've got a great dev team. Atlassian's our biggest funder. They're always coaching us. For example, their head of cybersecurity with his team once a year try and hack our platform, then work with our internal developers to like say, here's where you might be slightly vulnerable. So this is what I'd do if I were you. You know, their treasury team will say, hey, we switched to this merchant provider for these reasons. Do you want a meeting with them? We'll help you piggyback and try and get our rates type of thing. So like, couldn't have asked for a better partner. They're so much more than just capital. And so we haven't run into scaling issues, not because we're that smart, but because we've got like the best teachers in Australia helping us. And we've got a really good dev team. That's all internal. So our bigger risk is we don't grow quick enough and there's innovation in the industry and we're left behind.
Just on growth and gain, how do you balance short-term gain with long-term social impact, and how are you measuring the social impact around education?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Thanks, George.
So, in the short, like when we started Humanitix 5 years ago, our view was like, look, if everything goes well in the next year, we might give 10 grand to our projects. Mm-hmm. Now, if that's going to get divvied up between 5 partners, like we're giving 2 grand to each partner, like let's make sure it's not a really dodgy charity, but let's just do a common sense approach and pick good ones. And when we're hopefully giving $10 million a year, we can put a hell of a lot of science around it. And then very quickly we realized, hold on, there's something smarter we can do. We can piggyback off the smartest educational funders. So, you know, people like the Atlassian Foundation, we're now meeting with the Paul Ramsey Foundation, who are the biggest foundation in Australia. They've the biggest giver to education in Australia. And they're quite happy to share with us why they fund what they fund. So we're now putting that science behind how we make educational impact. Going into the US right now, we're trying to find those partners. So we've reached out to groups like the Gates Foundation to say, hey, what do you fund and why? Because you've probably worked out a way better answer than me and Adam and our team can come up with in the next month. So we've always had a highly collaborative approach, but that way we can know that we're not dusting money on feel-good philanthropy. It's like, it's actually, these are the most evidence-based impactful projects. And so that's probably going to be our strategy for a while yet. Our dream, you know, if we're the size of Eventbrite in 10 years' time, we'll be spitting out about $60 million a year at no extra cost to anyone into these education programs. At that scale, we'll have, you know, maybe then we'll be consulting to other smaller social enterprises saying, hey, this is why we fund what we fund. But at this scale, it's a different story.
And is the plan just to stay with education or move into other fields?
Yeah, we don't have plans to move outside of education at the moment. It's interesting, when we launch maybe our second product, we'd maybe align it with a different cause, but we don't have another product in mind, if that was the next question. We're going to stay on ticketing for at least the next 5 years, just ticketing. Yeah.
Have you had the opportunity to visit any of these projects yourself and see the impact that you've made?
Yeah, so we didn't talk about it, but in Australia, we actually fund Indigenous education initiatives. Yep. And very excitingly, our first year 12 student who was on full scholarship with us just finished year 12 about 3 weeks ago or something. He's been in our office the last 2 weeks on a paid internship, and we're teaching about tech and sales. And so, yeah, that's been incredibly rewarding to see it go full circle. And so we haven't got to visit Room to Read's projects. We were going to, but then COVID hit. But we've met with their staff in America and here. But with Yallery, who's our Indigenous partner, and they're based in Queensland but national, we've had plenty of meetings with them, and right now we've got alumni working with us, and we're creating pathways of employment because Indigenous representation in tech is almost non-existent, unfortunately. So, yeah, it's that's been incredibly cool for the team.
Fantastic. That must have been an amazing feeling when you had that first graduate, to know the impact you've made on one person's life and hopefully many, many more. Just getting some questions coming through from our socials. I've got one here from Ben who has asked, what have been the scaling challenges that you didn't anticipate?
Yeah, good question. I guess the one we're going through right now is hiring. Like, me and Adam have never had to run a company. Right now, we're about 20 full-time staff. We've never had to run a company of this size before, and now we're aggressively growing. And so, yeah, finding people that fit our culture, who have amazing work ethics but have a heart of gold, that is a really unique person that you're looking for. And so that's probably our biggest scaling challenge right now, is finding talent, people who are happy to check their ego at the door and recognize that the biggest way we can have an impact is working at a team, disrupting the events ticketing industry. It's very different to the romantic notion that I personally had at high school, which was running off into a frontline charity and doing something in India. The reality of it is I can do more helping event organizers in Australia, which is a very different reality in the day job. And so that attracting talent to this mission is a scaling challenge that we've got.
And do you believe it is a unique type of individual who wants to work for an organisation like yourself?
Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me because I love it, but I'm biased. It's not a major challenge. It's probably our biggest challenge right now because it's so easy to get people wrong, and like a culture can be ruined with one or two bad apples. And right now we have an amazing culture. Like our staff really care about the mission, and that means they really care about our clients. And so we don't want to lose that. We think that's a competitive advantage. Our industry is notorious for treating customers terribly, and that's our biggest point of difference, along with our social impact.
You must be able to see my screen because I just got a question from Lisa saying, how do you define your culture and what are your values?
Yeah, our values, our staff can be themselves at work. So I'll step back. Like until about 2 years ago, we were. This was even after Atlassian started funding us. We were working from my co-founder Adam's parents' place. So we had 11 of us around their home working, and it'd be summer, so a few people would be sitting outside with their shirts off. His 91-year-old grandfather lived there as well as his big dog, and so it was a real family vibe. Even though at that stage we'd scaled and we had Westfield using us across the shopping centers for their events, we had Atlassian funding us, and it was only a few months after we won the Google Impact Challenge that we moved into offices. And so our culture is you can be yourself. Like you see cool stuff in tech companies where you can dress how you want, you don't have to get suited up and all that stuff. So all that's part of our culture. But most importantly, people can be vulnerable. So me and Adam, being best mates, we'll rip on each other, and we'll rip on each other in front of the team. And so they all feel like they can rip on us. And it's not that advert. It's like a very flat structure where humor is very well accepted. It's also a very open office. Like we've got one refugee, one guy who's just got his citizenship as well. A lot of LGBTQI, definitely higher than the general population. And what's really cool is they wear their heart on their sleeve. So it's a very open office culturally. And I love it. It's like people can be themselves at work. They don't have to put on a facade. I don't know how we're going to scale that, but right now it's a really nice sweet spot.
And following on from that, how would you describe your leadership style around them? You mentioned, you try to have a bit of a joke with Adam, but how would they see you as a leader, your staff?
Yeah, we've always had the attitude of you lead from the front. So like, I've never stopped being a salesperson for the organization. And so I'll work and so does Adam. I remember it was actually a lesson I learned looking at Woolworths. Like 7 years ago, Woolworths went through a period where the investors hated them and Coles was winning. And it's because part of the problem was they'd moved their office to Bella Vista, their big head office. And the management team were so far removed from the frontline stores. And so as part of the turnaround, Brad Banducci, the CEO, made management go and spend a week in store. I think it was every quarter or something like that, just so they had a sense of the vibe. And so, we lead from the front. Like we're always chatting to real customers. And as far as we can scale, I'll always be chatting to real customers, understanding what our customer service team is going through, understanding what our sales team goes through. So I think that inspires the team as well. That's how we try to manage it. We're moving more from like, when you're a team of 10, information passes through osmosis. When you scale to a team of 20 and more, you have to have systems and sharing of information through actual management systems. And so we've done a lot of work on that the last 12 months. So that's been an interesting change. So now a lot more of my other time is managing 3 levels of stakeholders. One is leaders within our teams. The other is funders. And the third is prospective partnerships. So that's kind of how me and Adam, spend a lot of our time now and the way we're thinking about it.
Fantastic. I could have done with more leaders like you throughout my work experience. You touched on briefly before some of the future plans, but where do you see Humanitix in say 5-10 years? What's the future look like?
Yeah, so we're going to be the world's leading self-service ticketing platform. So using Eventbrite as a benchmark today, we'll be spitting out about $50 to $60 million in these annoying booking fees into a sustainable funding stream for our education projects. Other charities can also use our platform at our sustainable cost price, which right now is about a 60-70% discount to Eventbrite's package for paid events. And so we'll also be saving charities about $10-15 million in fees that would have leaked to Eventbrite. At that point, we will have also launched other verticals. Can't tell you what they'll be yet. There's a couple that we're considering. But our idea is Amazon started in books, but now look at what they do. Can we build this juggernaut of fixing the world that are just these ethical products that you as a person can use? You don't have to compromise. You don't have to pay an ethical premium. That's why we call ourselves a charity for the tech generation. One of the issues we saw with the social enterprise sector is if, say, for example, you want to buy a shirt that's made in a sweatshop, you have to pay extra because there's higher labor rates, which is a good thing, but it means only 2 types of people buy it: rich people or ethical people, which means you miss out on the mass market. Yeah. So we've always said we're always going to build ethical products that don't have an ethical premium. And that you can do in software quite a lot easier than in physical goods. And so that's kind of the vision that we want to take this in over the next decade or 2.
Fantastic. You've mentioned Eventbrite quite a few times. Have you seen any changes in their model or their pricing or anything in reaction to you?
The Australian team, I got forwarded an email last week from one of our clients with a very disparaging email from our competitor, which, we took with the grain, it's like, okay, cool. At least we're doing something right if they're doing that. But no, we haven't seen much change. We're a fly on the wall still for them. They're massive globally. In Australia, we're almost as big as them now, we think. So their Australian team knows about us, but they don't run the show. Their American team runs the show.
Fantastic. I'm just going to finish up with one question, and it would be remiss of me not to ask, being we're part of Impactology Live, but what does impact mean to you?
Yeah, I think ultimately I want to end my life and feel like I was on the frontier of ethical evolution. So if you think about it, what might they care about in 300 years' time that we're doing in our day-to-day that is just seen in 300 times as despicable? 300 years ago, it wasn't despicable to have slaves in that context. Today it is. And that's a great thing. And we'd be fools to think that in 300 years, we won't have been doing things that will be seen in that light. Mm-hmm. And so impact to me is trying to move the ethical settings of our society in a stronger direction that hopefully in the future, that will just be how it is. And so I think this is an awesome way to do business. I'm not saying that traditional business is terrible. It's done lots of great things for the world. But I really feel like we're on an exciting frontier of something that can create a lot of impact. And I think truly scalable impact is when you change the values of your society.
Josh, with the measuring impact moving forward, under a traditional corporate structure, you've got your qualitative and quantitative KPIs. Given your direction and given the focus on education, what does it mean in regards to social impact KPIs? How are you grappling with that? How are you probably rewriting the rule books in regards to how you define success moving forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we're actually doing a lot of work to redefine that right now. So there's another area of impact we haven't talked about, which I'll just very quickly touch on, but we're also trying to solve accessibility at events for people with disabilities. And that starts with buying tickets. So we've done a lot of work with Vision Australia and other accessibility consultants to make our online purchase process actually usable for someone with a severe vision impairment. And then we've also built a module on the back end that can help event organizers cater to accessibility requirements. And so a lot of our KPI measurements are going to be going forward on how we're trying to solve that problem. The number one issue reported by Australians with disabilities is community participation, and events lie at the heart of that. So we think we've got a role to play there technologically, but that will take us a long time to make material improvements to. Then there's the obvious one of, well, how many booking fees are we turning into funding for our education programs, and what are the outputs of our education programs? And so that we already measure. And those are kind of the key things we're thinking about. And then in new markets, it's speed to self-funding. So part of the vision here was to create self-funding charities that don't rely on philanthropists. So I'm very proud to share Australia doesn't need philanthropists anymore. It stands on its own 2 feet. And so that idea of creating a charity that spits out impact but doesn't cost anything is what we've built with Humanitix. And so there's a philanthropic return on capital metric there that, when you give to a normal charity, you're hoping 90 cents goes to the project. When Atlassian put 1.2 million into Humanitix Australia, they're hoping 4,000% goes to the project, which is a bit of a mind flip. The same way a VC investor would not expect 90 cents back from a dollar invested, they'd expect a 40 times, 50 times multiplier. We've got the same economics within our charity. And so that's the ultimate KPI. Can we prove to be the philanthropy on steroids?
And is there anywhere in the world that is probably going about that in a really good way that you can tap into, or is it a completely new frontier for you and the rest of the sector to be able to rewrite the principles around social impact KPIs?
Yeah, I'd definitely be wrong if I said we were the only ones. But what's really exciting is we're definitely one of the only ones doing this that I've seen in the world, and we've been doing it for 5 years now. Thank you. They're an amazing organisation out of Melbourne. They're further along the journey than we are. They're trailblazing, and they don't have the inherent software return on capital advantage, but that's not to say that they haven't achieved an awesome multiplier effect, or that they won't. And so and then there's a few more international, like Ecosia is a cool organization. They're a search engine planting trees. That's probably the closest I've seen to our concept. I think what's unique is not many organizations are doing it in a software space. The fact that we're in year 5 and about to launch our North American operation, profitable in Australia, profitable in New Zealand, that's the exciting element of this, and there's not many examples of that in the world.
Just to finish up, we've got a couple of final questions that, Josh, we actually ask all our guest speakers. So are you ready for the questions?
Yeah.
Okay. The first one is, if you're on a video call with your 18-year-old self, what advice would you provide young Josh?
With any discretionary income you have, travel as much as you can, because as much as you think you might do it later in life, things will get in the way. You'll fall in love with someone or some project, and you won't want to be backpacking anymore. So do it while you can.
Wonderful. And the second one is actually a game of word association. So I'll share a word, you fire back the first word that comes into mind. Impact.
Humanitix.
Humanitix.
Impact.
That's cheating. Adam McCurdy.
Best mate.
Education.
Sustainability.
Events.
Opportunity.
NFP sector.
Critical.
2020.
Disaster.
The future.
Damn exciting.
Josh, thank you so much for making time to chat with us today. We absolutely love your story and Adam's story. And as I said, we use the platform for the event, and it was absolutely seamless from a user perspective, and it was just easy reporting and everything. And it's a bit of a plug for anyone that's thinking, yeah, but they're an emerging social enterprise doing ticketing. I'm telling you, it's the real deal. So Humanitix, check it out. And Josh, we'd love to keep in touch. We want to continue to learn more about your story as you continue to grow and how we can help you. So thank you again.
Thanks, Josh.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Josh. Thanks, Ash. And let's definitely jump on a call when you're finished with this marathon. Good luck with it all. And thanks so much for having us on it.
Thanks very much.
Thank you
And
so
for
much.
supporting our platform. Cheers.
That was Josh Ross. And Yeah, we'll be putting some details up on our website as well in regards to Humanitix and the work that they're doing at the moment. The time is just on 1:45 to the hour, and at 4 o'clock in 15 minutes, we've actually got Ruby Lee who'll be joining us. So the usual drill. Go get yourself a drink, stretch your legs, ring a mate, let them know that Ruby's on, but we'll see you
Happy hour.
Happy hour, yeah, happy hour, yes. We'll see you in 15 minutes.